before the budget, basically. After the budget, this is what they're forecasting. Therefore, the real pain is not supposed to hit for a while yet, till after the next election. And then a budget surplus of 2.3% of GDP by 10 years from now, and apparently growing forever? It's impossible. An economist would say it's not stock flow consistent. In other words, it makes implicit predictions about private sector balance sheets which are literally impossible. This is something to do with, as Phil mentioned at the beginning, problems with mainstream economics. Their models, the model the Treasury uses, is not stock flow consistent. It's why they always get the wrong answers. I haven't got time to explain it now, but believe me, this isn't going to happen. Even if they somehow get re-elected. It's not going to turn out like this. It couldn't do. We've got 180% or so of our disposable income as household debt. It's not going to be 540% in another 10 years. We would need 500-year mortgages or something ridiculous like that. It's just not going to happen. It can't do. What we are not saying, we are not saying a government can spend without limit. Oh, I should have put that right. Phil told me about that one. Kind of we are, actually. We're not saying it's wise for a government to spend without limit. Of course not. You can even project, based on what we know about private sector balance sheets and all the other elements of policy, in order to achieve full employment. We believe in an employment guarantee scheme, me and Phil. We won't talk about now. Maybe he'll talk about that on another occasion. But you can project what level of budget deficit you expect. We're not saying there shouldn't be a budget. We're just saying it should always be in deficit. We should forget this idea, or virtually always be in deficit. If you had a really amazing boom, which we're not going to have given the amount of private debt we have, it is possible to imagine circumstances under which you might run a surplus. Not likely, not in Australia. Governments have normally run deficits and will continue to do so. A monetary sovereign government faces no financial budget constraint. We don't need cuts at the moment. You might think some areas of the economy should have higher taxes. For redistributive reasons, yes, by all means. But because we need the higher taxes to pay for government spending, it's nonsense. Don't say it. Don't say it. Whichever party you're from. I haven't said anything which is a matter of opinion or theory yet. Anything at all. This would even apply if you were a convinced member of the Liberal Party. So far. It's just a series of facts. There is, for Australia, no such thing as a sustainable budget surplus. There is no budget emergency, except the one the government may be creating. A question, which you might have. Let me ask a question. Why don't the politicians and their advisors tell us the truth? Someone asked the first Nobel Prize winner in economics, Paul Samuelson, who lived to be very old, only died in 2009. He actually saw the GFC. When the GFC struck, he said, I wish Milton Friedman had lived long enough to see what was going to happen. Well, when he was asked, why don't we tell people the truth, Paul Samuelson said, well, what we tell people is like an old-fashioned religion. You can't trust the politicians. If they understood the freedom that they really have, they would abuse it. In other words, like an old-fashioned religion, the metaphors, messages which you're provided with are supposed to scare you. And of course they're in the interests of some groups in society as well, but they are the truth. And leading economists like Paul Samuelson, Paul Krugman, Joseph Stiglitz, these people, they know. Even the Deputy Secretary of the US Treasury under Bill Clinton, he knew that book. They know the truth. Now, Joseph Stiglitz, who I greatly admire, and Paul Krugman, who I also greatly admire, despite the fact he doesn't like to have an argument with Steve Keen, somebody else I greatly admire, they occasionally, particularly in Paul Krugman's blog, and in some of the informal writings of Joseph Stiglitz, write like a modern monetary theorist. But they have so much to lose if they go across that dividing line. The ones I spoke about at the beginning, the weird deficit hawks, Robert Lucas has a Nobel Prize in economics. The Bank of Sweden awards them. It's full of deficit hawks. Edward Prescott has a Nobel Prize in economics. Robert Barrow's the loopiest of them all. The centre or left in Australia, they'd be in the blue, most of them. Although Greg Mankiw was an advisor to President Bush, but apart from him. The neo-Keynesians, they're the ones they go, like I was saying, yeah, maybe on average the government ought to balance its budget. They know governments don't have to, like I was just saying about Paul Samuelson. Sorry, I got his year of death wrong. But nonetheless, they're in the deficit doves camp. This comes from the Washington Post. There is a whole school of thought which you hear very little about in Australia, which is a great shame. It's because we haven't had a terrible crisis here, basically, so we haven't had to rethink. With some of the people I mentioned earlier, James Galbraith, Warren Mosler, Randall Wray, inspired by people like Hyman Minsky, who nobody'd heard of until the GFC and then everybody'd heard of. In Australia, we have one of the world's greatest economists, a neglected prophet, you might say. One of the people that developed modern monetary theory, Bill Mitchell, at the University of Newcastle, and a research body called Coffee. He runs a blog site called Billy Blog. You should look it up and follow it. He's brilliant. And the leading modern monetary theorist in South Australia is sitting over there. These are the deficit doves, who understand what I've just been talking about. Now, I've spent too long going through all this stuff, so I won't say very much more. This was just a simulation saying that if Joe Hockey gets lucky, if they cut interest rates to zero and combine it with tightening the government budget, then maybe the private sector will go into more debt for a while and maybe the economy will pick up a bit more, but it won't last because of the growing debt burden. That's what that was going to say. This is the only slide with our opinions on. The government budget should be at whatever level it needs to be for us to have full employment. There's no reason why we can't have full employment, and in fact I think if what the Greens want, generally speaking, for the economy is going to work out, then eventually there'll have to be an employment guarantee scheme, a voluntary one, where people are properly paid and have proper working conditions, and there's been a lot of work done by Bill Mitchell on this. We tax and spend. This used to be described as functional finance, as necessary to limit inflation. We do things other than put interest rates up to try and discourage quite so much private sector, especially household debt. And the bottom part speaks for itself, really. That's the take-home message that I started with the important bit being the underlined bit at the bottom. Those are the books that I mentioned. Look up, if you're interested in these ideas, look up Warren Mosler and get this, it's about 60 pages long, get this book for free on the internet. He's a multi-millionaire, he doesn't mind giving his books away.
Can you just read the title?
It's called The 7 Deadly Innocent Frauds of Economic Policy. It's by Warren Mosler. You could just type in Warren Mosler, or just Mosler even, which is an easy name to remember, on Google. Or if you like, I'll send you these slides if you get in touch with me later. I'm quite happy to. That's it. Thank you very much.
I'm sure lots of you have questions, so if you do, please put up your hand and direct your questions either to Phil or to Steve. Are there any questions? Yes.
If, as you say, a sovereign issue of currency is an unlimited supply of funds, which obviously it has, how do countries accumulate foreign debt, or why?
Well, they don't. The Australian government doesn't have a limitless supply of US dollars or Japanese yen, but actually modern monetary theorists are, under nearly all circumstances, very much opposed to building up foreign debt. In the case of Australia, Australia has a negative net international investment position, that's what we call it, for the rest of the world, of about something like 60% of our GDP. But the net debt of the Australian government, the whole of the net debt of the Australian government, is only about 14% of GDP. So we do borrow from the rest of the world. We borrow in our own currency, or we hedge the foreign exchange risk, so that in the case of Australia, weirdly, if our currency gets weaker, we gain from that, just because of the way in which it's structured at the moment. But the big borrowers are the big four banks, they're not the government. Why do countries borrow in foreign currency? If you're a developing country with a small economy, you don't really have much option than to do that. But it's something that we don't think is a good idea, large-scale foreign currency borrowing, because it compromises your monetary sovereignty. It compromises it in the sense that if you then spend, if the government then spends more in order to try and bring about full employment and to provide all the public goods people need and the infrastructure people need, then it can put downward pressure on the currency. And putting downward pressure on your currency when you've got foreign currency denominated debt and you haven't hedged the currency risk on that debt makes it more and more burdensome to pay off that debt in the future, and that's where developing countries can get into foreign currency debt problems. There's no reason for Australia ever to be in that position. So.
We've got one over here.
What's your view of negative gearing?
It's a terrible idea. The politics of getting rid of it, there's a lot of terrible ideas that have been introduced in Australia down the years. To mention one that's controversial, and that people might throw up their hands in horror, the private superannuation system was a terrible idea. Why was it a terrible idea? It doesn't help providing goods and services for elderly people in the future. It doesn't help at all. The constraint when it comes to providing for the elderly in the future is to do with whether we have the infrastructure and the technology and the skills in order to provide what elderly people need. It doesn't matter who's spending the money. It doesn't matter whether it's the government spending the money or whether it's you spending what you think of as your money coming out of your superannuation fund. If the goods and services aren't there, we'll get inflation anyway. If they are there, it doesn't matter where the spending comes from. Why was it a bad idea? Partly, this is related to your question, because it created further impetus for an asset price bubble, as negative gearing does, but also partly because it's financialised our attitude to the elderly. We can have the sort of view that people had in traditional societies, where we're all in the same boat and we look after each other and we don't tolerate excessive inequality. But as soon as you move towards private superannuation, you change the frame of how people see the elderly, and inequality in old age becomes far more acceptable. Indeed, for young people, you get to the point where they can't see how there could be an alternative. But the idea that you need private superannuation and you need tax incentives to give people an incentive to provide for their old age themselves, and this is going to help the economy in the future in some way because it's going to prevent the government having to deal with that burden, is just a fallacy. It's not true.
And negative gearing?
Negative gearing, well, that just creates more of an incentive for upward pressure on property prices, which then, of course, drags mortgage debt up even further. And all the ways in which we've supported the housing market in Australia have put a bias into that market so that we have amongst the world's most expensive property at the moment. It goes with the world's highest household debt. You need only a small recession, a not particularly significant increase in interest rates, and the whole house of cards could come crashing down. I'm not forecasting when that will happen. Professor Steve Keen made such a forecast a few years ago and ended up having to do a forfeit. I think he had to walk to Mount Kosciuszko